TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.LIVE, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.LIVE. We're all about the news, talk, information, and entertainment that drivers want to hear. We're talking with Rocky Romanella, the author of Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. You've got some great insight here, Rocky, and
passion or coaching passion. I just did it in a different venue, which was inside a business setting versus a classroom setting. So I graduated college, became a full-time supervisor. After I drove, I was a driver in Plainfield, New Jersey. I loved the job. It was a tremendous opportunity to meet some wonderful people, and it taught me a valuable lesson about kind of working your way up from the bottom. And I thought it was so important for me to understand all the facets of every job that we did. And so that became a lesson for me that throughout my career, I really took to heart and always made sure that I never forgot that feeling and understanding how important that was. And so my dad told me two things when I started my job. He said, hey, whatever they ask you to do, say yes and thank you, and then learn the job and learn some more. And so as they were tapping me on the shoulder for new opportunities in UPS, and we had a promotion from within policy, I would look at them and say, you sure, you really think I'm the right person for this job? I mean, we got a big company here. A lot of be a lot smarter people than me. And like, no, we think it's, we think this is a good opportunity for you. And so all I could hear my dad was, hey, just say yes and move. So I moved to Chicago. I moved 9 times with UPS. And what I realized is that you have to believe in your people until they're ready to believe in themselves. And UPS believed in me way ahead of me believing in myself. And then that helped me bridge that gap of confidence and knowledge. And so, I had some great opportunities inside UPS. For example, we purchased mailboxes, et cetera, and rebranded it to the UPS store. I had that as a direct report and made the recommendation to the rebranding. And it was just been a great success, and certainly not because of me, because of all the great entrepreneurs. It's 100% franchisee owned. And I learned so much from those independent business owners. Like many of the folks on the radio show today, they're independent business owners. They happen to own a vehicle, own a truck versus a storefront, but they are independent business owners, and they're the backbone of our country and a backbone of our economy. And so I got a chance to meet such great people like that. And then later on, we built UPS Supply Chain Solutions, made over 20 acquisitions, and I had this side of the world for UPS. In fact, one of the most proudest moments I have even today is that I led us going into the healthcare sector. Now I see UPS delivering the vaccines. It's great pride with which I get a chance to look at that and see that and say, wow, that's wonderful. And there's so many great companies out there, Old Dominion, FedEx, and the list goes on and on. Without that, without those vehicles and those individuals doing the things that they do, there's really not an economy to speak of, certainly not a vibrant economy that there is today. Retired from UPS at 55 with 36 years. Got recruited to be a CEO of a telecom company. We built cell towers, upgraded cell towers, sold that, and then started my own business, 360 Management Services. So I guess you could argue that the thing I failed the most at is retirement.
Well, life's too much fun.
Yeah.
Why retire, right?
That's right.
Well, that, and my wife keeps saying to me, you're not following me around ShopRite, so I get a job if I were you. Okay.
Well, a lot of our drivers have driving actually as a second career. They did something in their previous life, and then they're driving now. So they can totally relate.
It makes you feel like you're part of something, right? So for me, I always believe in this concept of legacy. You leave things a little better than you found them. And I was fortunate to have meet some wonderful people and learn so many things from so many people. And hopefully I was able to help some people along the way as well. And I feel like now with my book, Tighten the Lug Nuts, and some of the keynote speaking and training we do, I feel like it's at least a chance to continue to give back a little bit. So I'm hoping that as people read the book, whether, you're in leadership roles, or we're all leaders at one time or another. I mean, there's no, whether we're the Little League coach or on the soccer field or involved in the PTA, all of us are leaders at one time or another. And so I think that that's such an important profession, leadership. And so all of us can learn from that. And hopefully that, the book will help with that. But it's sort of my way to stay active and give back a little.
I love the title. It kind of goes back to your roots in the transportation industry. Tighten the Lug Nuts, the principles of balanced leadership.
Well, it's interesting, the title. So when you read, if you get a chance and you read the book and along your stops along the way, if you're out there driving and you have some time to stop along the way and you want to have a good book to read, hopefully you'll pick up the book. But it really is a story inside the book. So each chapter is built on a story. There's a lesson involved, but it's a story. And this one was one that I was walking around one of our facilities, and I noticed that. And as all of you do out there, you do your pre-chip, and there's certain things you look for, the gas cap on, or any loose lug nuts, and all the things that are important, the pressure of the tires. It's the things you can visibly, just no different than pilots do when they walk around the airplanes. And I noticed that it looked like a couple loose lug nuts on a vehicle there. And so I grabbed, as I was walking towards the automotive supervisor and was going to have a conversation about another situation, I said to him, hey, by the way, before we get on this other topic, I think we've got some loose lug nuts over there. And so he looked at me and said, okay, I got it. But what he got for me? And so he was all excited to get involved in this next, opportunity or thing to work on. And so we talked about a couple of things that he needed to work on and help with from an automotive perspective. And then a couple of days later, I'm looking for him just to see how he made out. And they said, hey, he's working out a potential road call. So I go to the office, I see him on the phone. I say, hey, what's going on? He said, well, he said, one of the vehicles, the driver called and said he feels like the front tire's a little bit loose. And I said, hey, is that the one I talked to you about? He said, yeah. I go, why don't you just tighten the lug nuts? And he looked at me and I said to him, hey, don't ever allow, this is the lesson here, don't ever allow important things to become urgent. Now, thankfully, there was no injuries or accidents and nothing fatal happened. But at the end of the day, if you think about it in life, you have important things. But when you don't take care of them, when you can take care of them, they become urgent. You can only juggle so many urgent things. So the lesson is tighten the lug nuts. Don't allow important things to become urgent. And that's how the book, that's the title of the book and the lesson in there.
And I think we're all guilty of that. It's something, if something's urgent, maybe it seems just too big to deal with at the time, something we don't want to deal with. So we put it off on the back burner, so to speak. And then all of a sudden it becomes catastrophic. It's like, now I have to deal with it. How does someone stop doing that? Because it is a form of procrastination.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it always comes down to, you have to put things into categories, I think. And for me, it's always about what are the nice to do things and need to do things. And I think sometimes what happens is we love to do the nice to do things, but there are need, but what are the need to do things? And so you have to stay focused on those need to do things, because the minute you let, in that case, tightening those lug nuts was a need to do thing. And it wasn't nice to do, it was need to do. And when you don't take care of the need to do things, it comes back around at some point, and then everything stops. And now you have to stop everything you're doing, and now you have to take care of that. So for me, I always kept these two lists, nice to do, need to do, and made sure that I didn't kind of always wander towards the nice to do, and made sure I took care of what are the need to do things I have to take care of, is it some maintenance on the vehicle? Is it an additional training I need to get, or make sure that I'm, my qualifications are all where they need to be and I don't let them lapse. And, those kinds of things are all need to do things. And even though you're a highly qualified, highly skilled driver, 1 or 2 days later, it always seems like that's the one day someone says to you, hey, let me see your records, or let me check your logs, and all those kinds of things. So I think it's important to understand the need to do things, and always keep a watchful eye on those. And so before the week was out, I'd always make sure that I hit I'd start the week knowing what my need to do things are, and I'd end the week knowing that I handle those need to do things.
Well, and when you go through the list and you check them all off, you have less pressure. I would think that would lead to less stress, because our world today is super stressed. Probably more so since 2020.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing is the precious commodity that you never get back is time.
Yes.
And so, once you miss that opportunity to take care of the thing we need to take care of it, now you're moving along, and then all of a sudden, wow, now I've got to stop everything. And now I've got to take care of this, situation I could have taken care of in a few minutes. And now it becomes, 2 hours worth of my time, and you never get that back.
Right.
It's kind of like that person that's talking to you that you think to yourself, okay, I'll never get this time back. Okay, this is a great conversation. I'll never get this back in my life. So you got to think about it that way. I mean, why am I using this time that I could have used that is so precious? And I think that's it's that precious gift that you have of time that you never get back once it's used.
And I think when we come back on our next segment, I'd like to cover more of this because I'm sure that there are people out there, drivers, who could really work on maybe their organizational skills. Not everybody finds that easy. People put things off. They could be a little scatterbrained here and there. They may not admit to it, but this sort of thing and maybe rethinking things will help you succeed. And certainly you're going to be less stressed because you're dealing with the stuff that's got to be done. And I know that your book covers a lot more elements than that. We're talking with Rocky Romanella, the author of Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. There's some great information he's got to talk about, certainly for the drivers, for owner operators. Learn to be great leaders, learn to succeed. I think we all want to do that. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly. We'll be back shortly. Definitely stay tuned here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
This info blog on TNCRadio.LIVE is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Everything truck drivers need to know about sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is an issue that affects 1 out of 3 truck drivers. Truck drivers who drive tired may be unaware of how much their lack of sleep affects their driving. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration attributes 2.2% of all driving accident fatalities to drowsy driving. While there's not a law in place that requires truck drivers to get testing for sleep apnea, if you suspect you have sleep apnea, stay with us to learn more about sleep apnea and how it can affect truck drivers. What is sleep apnea? Sleep apnea is a potentially serious sleep disorder that causes you to have pauses in your breathing or take shallow breaths during sleep. It's an extremely common issue that affects millions of people in the United States. If you snore loudly during the night or still feel tired after a full night's rest, you might have sleep apnea. According to the Mayo Clinic, the main types of sleep apnea are obstructive sleep apnea, the more common form that occurs when throat muscles relax, central sleep apnea, which occurs when your brain doesn't send proper signals to the muscles that control breathing. Complex sleep apnea syndrome, also known as treatment-emergent central sleep apnea, occurs when someone has both obstructive sleep apnea and central sleep apnea. Symptoms of sleep apnea. According to the Sleep Foundation, all 3 types of sleep apnea share certain common symptoms. Disrupting breathing, in which a person's respiration can become labored or even stop for up to a minute at a time. Excessive daytime sleepiness, morning headaches, irritability, limited attention span, or difficulty thinking clearly. Many of these symptoms arise because of poor sleep and decreased oxygen levels that occur as a result of interrupted breathing. Some additional symptoms are connected to obstructive sleep apnea. Snoring, including snoring that's especially loud and involves gasping, choking, or snorting that may cause a person to briefly wake up. Morning sore throat or dry mouth. Frequent need to wake up to urinate. Causes and treatment options for sleep apnea. Sleep apnea occurs when the airway becomes blocked while sleeping. Here are some common causes of an increase in airway blockage. Being overweight, sedative medication, alcohol, family history of sleep apnea, smoking cigarettes, sleeping on your back, nasal congestion. If you suspect you have sleep apnea, reach out to your doctor to get a treatment plan going. Avoiding treating your sleep apnea can result in losing the ability to operate a commercial motor vehicle. Most often, treatment plans will require you to have a CPAP machine in your truck. The CPAP machine helps pump oxygen to you while you sleep. In addition to using the CPAP machine, your doctor may recommend exercising, losing weight, or using different oral appliances that help hold open your airways. As a truck driver, it's crucial to take care of yourself because trucking is such a difficult and demanding job. At times, it can be challenging to take care of your health. Sleep apnea is a real issue in the trucking industry. We encourage all drivers to be aware of the symptoms and to get help if they suspect they have sleep apnea. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network on app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
For the latest in Houston traffic, weather, news, and information, don't miss the Evening Surge weekdays from 4 to 6 p.m. on TNCRadio.LIVE.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Rocky Romanella. He's the author of Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership, where it's a motivational book. You can learn to be a great leader. We were talking about dealing with things, just getting the things that need to be done. In our previous segment, Rocky, I'm wondering if you wanted to maybe elaborate a little more on that, because organizational skills are really something that people need to practice. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's the concept of juggling balls. I mean, I'm showing my age here a little bit, but years ago on the old Ed Sullivan show, and I know you guys like to run some of the old classics on your station as well on behalf of the drivers, but it's the old Ed Sullivan show, and the person was spinning the plates, right? And they're kind of moving the plates around. If you didn't do it, if you didn't take care of the spinning of the plates, it's, plates start to drop, you start to break them. And it's the same with organization. It's like, how do you keep spinning those plates? How do you juggle the balls? And I think that it's important to make sure that, as we talked about in the first segment there, don't allow important things to become urgent. Take care of the things you can take care of. And I think that, it's losing sight of that first plate you started to spin, because you're so excited now. You're up to number 9, number 10, number 11. Oh my God, I forgot to go back to number 1 and spin it again. So it's really the ability to manage those different things and understand the important and urgent things, and then just stay organized and whenever you can take care of something, take care of it, because if you don't, it always comes back later on to be a problem.
When somebody's not good at this, do you have some tips for them to start being more organized? Because I have seen people that just have paperwork everywhere and they aren't keeping track of stuff and they don't know where it is, and then they get frazzled.
Well, I think it comes down to a couple things. Well, in the first segment, we talked about it. Make sure you clearly understand what's important and what's urgent, and then make sure that you have that list of what's important and what's urgent, and keep it current, right? Because things become important depending on what's going on, the time of the year, or the day of the week, or the seasonality of the thing. So I think that would be the first, and we've talked about that. I also think you really need to kind of, I always say, maintain a good emotional. Don't have the emotional roller coasters. Don't let your highs get too high and your lows get too low. And I think because what happens is when things are going really well for you and you're on a good roll, everything seems to fall into place. And then when things aren't going well, it seems like nothing you do works. You see it in sports all the time. A player will go up, and if they're in a really good hitting streak, everything they hit just seems to find a place in the outfield or in the infield where no one is. If they're in a bad place or bad streak, it just seems like they hit the ball to every player there is, or can't hit the ball. And so it's the same in business and in our life, that we have those moments where we're just not connecting. And so when you're in that place where maybe things aren't going the way you'd like, you're just coming off a really good time, and so you really need to kind of really understand, maintain that emotional, and don't have that emotional roller coaster, and understand that if you're up there if you're up on the top of the pinnacle right now, you're going to come down to the bottom at some point. So take care of all the things you can take care of when you're up on the top, so that when you get to that bottom, you have less things to worry about, and you can get yourself right back on track again. So I would say, don't let your highs get too highs and your lows get too low. And I think the last piece is I think it's important when in organizations, sometimes in all things we do, the really truly great leaders and the people that really differentiate themselves from everyone else. And if you think about the successful truckers that and the small trucking companies that are really doing well out there, it's really the companies that understand the biggest thing they know is what they don't know. And sometimes when there's new things coming on board, there's new technology, don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, and I think that's what's so important as well. If there's an organization skill that you feel you're not as good as you could be on, well, then who can help you with that? Is there a peer that you know? Is there someone in your family? Always seek help in those things that you're not good at. And I think if you can recognize the biggest thing is what you don't know, and don't be afraid to ask help for the things you don't know. And especially when it comes to organization, you find some people that are really just tremendous in organization. And I scratch my head and like, how did they do that? Like, how are they on top of all these details? Well, then
sure.
that's the person I want to go talk to. Okay, can you give me a little help here? Because it seems like you don't miss a beat.
Oh, sure. Well, and there are people that enjoy doing that. I know that when I was in college, I was a secretary, and I kept an impeccably perfect desk. Not so much today. It wasn't something I enjoyed doing, but I know where everything is. But I kept things spotless. And there are people who can teach you these things. And it is so important. And especially when a driver's driving, they have limited space and they do have to plan their trips. And all of this is something, these are skills that can make their job so much easier. So they're not stressed out.
Well, and I think the other thing is that, they are, they're the person that makes it happen. And so, when you get into a little bit larger of an organization, then there's, as you said, there's other people that can help you.
Mm-hmm.
But when people always talk about, well, when you're in a big company, it's so difficult. Well, I think it's more difficult when you're the single entrepreneur, when you're the sole proprietor, because you're the chief cook and bottle washer.
You betcha.
And if you think about the entrepreneur, no one's, when you work for a large company, everybody says, well, I have P&L responsibility, or, you know what? Nobody has more P&L responsibility than an independent business owner, because nobody's more all in than they are. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, they hit the cash register, the draw opens, they pay their people, they pay their vendors, then they pay themselves.
Right.
And if you're a sole proprietor with your own vehicle, and well, you pay, you have the maintenance, you have to make sure that it's the fuel. You're paying all those people first. And then what's left is what you take home for your family. And so
exactly,
no one's more all in than them. And so I think that that's what I find so impressive. I always say to people, I'm not sure I could have done that. I look at the thing, people say, oh, look at, you've achieved some wonderful things in your career. Well, that may be true, but I don't know if I could have done that, because they're so good. They take everything they own in life, slide it across the table and say, hey, I want to buy a vehicle. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to, not to use a pun here, but I'm going to drive my success. I'm going to be the person behind the wheel. And I got to tell you, that's amazing that they can do that. But with that comes no one to hand things off to.
Right. Yep.
So I'm a fan.
Oh, absolutely. Owner operators and even regular drivers. It takes a lot of tenacity. It takes discipline. And certainly when you're an owner operator, they put out a lot of money for a truck and they decide to go out on their own. They got a lot on the line. There's a ton of skin in the game there. And then they have to make it happen.
Oh, absolutely. And even if you take the person out there that's driving on behalf of a large company like a UPS or FedEx or Overnight or Old Dominion, pick one of them, Swift, Covenant. If you think about it, they're the person carrying the brand. The brand isn't the person sitting at the corporate office. The brand is that person who's closest to the customer. They're the one that's executing the brand promise. So always say at UPS, it's not Rocky Romanella or, pick a CEO at the time. It's that driver that interacts every day with the customer, whether it's at the dock picking up, the pickup at the dock or making delivery. That's the company, and they're the one that executes the brand promise. Without them, there is no company.
And your book actually can help drivers as well as owner operators, because they have to use a lot of different skills. If they're dealing with their dispatcher, if they're at a loading dock and things are not going the way they're supposed to, and you've got somebody who's in your face, you have to be able to calm the situation down. And be a leader, because you get more pulling the chain than pushing it.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And by the way, the thing that leaders understand is not everything's a hill to die on. And unfortunately, if you think about that person that you work for that may have not been the greatest person to work for, or maybe that customer that was maybe some of your most difficult, customers or dispatchers, or think about anyone that, you think to yourself, wow, that was a difficult person to work for. It ends up that everything is equal to them. Everything is, the world's coming to an end and we got to do it right this minute. Or, no, not everything's a hill to die on. Not everything's equal. And so I think that's what's and not we're all individuals. We're all motivated different. So, and it's important to treat each other with dignity and respect. And if you think about it, those are the skills that especially small business owners need to have, because they're the head of sales and marketing. They're the CFO. They're the CEO. And so they're the individuals that have all those responsibilities just at different times of the day. And I think, the things that we talk about in the book is that ability to understand who the customer is, what are you trying to solve for, how do you handle, how do you make yourself and your people feel like valued individuals? This concept of balanced leadership is you think like a customer, you want your people and yourself to feel like valued individuals, and you act like an owner. And when you make your decisions in that balance of customers, people, share owner, stakeholders, you make much better decisions than if you were just making decisions. And so I think that they understand it, because they are owners, but the customer and the people side can sometimes get to be the difficult side of it.
And it does feel, in the past 20 years, perhaps, that customer service is not what it used to be. So you find more of an adversarial situation. And I think there are people who maybe don't have those people skills. They haven't been taught that. How do they develop that? Because you get a lot further with honey. You get more flies with honey than vinegar.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think for me, it was always putting a face to the customer, because I think what happens is the internet's a great thing. There's no question about it. But like anything else, I mean, all no matter how good something is, there's something bad going on in the background. It's just the good so good, you just don't notice it. When things are really bad, well, there are some good things happening. You just don't notice them. And I think if you think about it, what's happened over the course of time is people haven't had to interact with each other. And so what happens is then you get more, when someone's texting you or emailing you, they have a lot more enthusiasm. They have a lot more confidence than when they're with you face to face, one on one. And I think, unfortunately, that's part of the problem. And so I still think, though, in the business of trucking, in the business of kind of delivering the things that, the goods and services across the country, you still interact with people, whether it's in a terminal, whether it's in a store, whether it's at a point from point A to point B where you're, exchanging loads, you still have more interaction than most people do. And I think what happens is you still have to have those excellent interpersonal skills, ability to communicate, and the ability to have a conversation with a person one-on-one, where, I mean, you're not, texting people left and right. I mean, you're interacting with people. And I think that's what's so important. And unfortunately, a lot of people have lost that. I think that's the biggest concern I have coming out. We know there's a lot of concerns coming out of the pandemic, but, this whole kind of virtual learning and virtual conversation and Zoom meetings, at some point, people need to feel like they're part of something, right? And I don't know how I think extremes are no good. Maybe going to work to an office every single day maybe was a little bit of that extreme on that side. But I think virtually never coming to work is not, and always working from home. I think there's some issues that could come from that as well. And, if, like, for example, you can't text somebody they got a raise, you're going to have that conversation. If someone's not performing the way they need to perform, you're going to have that difficult conversation. Right. You can't have it via email, or you can't have it leaving them a voicemail. So I think that the ability to interact, the ability to have interpersonal skills, the ability to talk to each other and listen with empathy, I think is still such an important skill. And I think in the trucking industry, you still have to do those things. And I think the better you are at it, the better you are with your ability to grow your business and interact with your customers. Absolutely. You could really accomplish, you could go very, very far. If you have the right skills. Of course, that it takes practice. And that's something that maybe you could provide some tips when we come back. We have to go to another segment here for a few minutes. And we're talking to Rocky Romanella. He's the author of Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. He's got some great tips here. And I think that maybe we could really dig deep and find some tips that drivers and owner-operators could really benefit from. He's got some great insight. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for more coming up.
5 common health hazards truck drivers face. A healthy lifestyle is often overlooked by most truckers. Due to work conditions in the trucking industry, it's difficult for truckers to live a healthy lifestyle. Living on the road makes it hard for truckers to prioritize their health. Truck drivers have limited access to healthy food, lack of sleep, and exercise. Due to their work and living conditions, truck drivers statistically have more health problems. It's important for truck drivers to be aware of the common health hazards they face. To live a long, healthy life, truckers will have to focus on their health and make a conscious effort to be healthy. Sleep apnea. Sleep is crucial for truck drivers. Lack of sleep can make driving dangerous. A study shows that long-haul truck drivers obtain less sleep than the required amount for alertness on the job. Truckers need a good night's sleep to be fully alert and ready to take on the road the next morning. Getting a good night's sleep is crucial for keeping a truck driver alert and productive. Truck drivers travel several hundred miles each day. To reach their destination on time, they'll have to prioritize sleep so they can be alert and ready. Obesity. When you live in a tiny truck cab and drive for 11 hours a day, it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain a healthy lifestyle. As a result, obesity is a terrible problem that American truck drivers face. According to the American Dietetic Association, 86% of truck drivers are obese. Healthy food is hard to come by while driving and working on the road. Truck stops offer greasy, high-calorie food rather than healthy fruits and vegetables. It's important for truck drivers to be conscious of what they eat. There are many other health risks that come with fast food and truck stop food. High blood pressure, also known as hypertension, is a silent killer of both your health and trucking career. A poor diet, smoking, obesity, lack of exercise are causes of high blood pressure. Truckers need to be aware of the causes of high blood pressure and take necessary steps to avoid them. Not only does high blood pressure put your life at risk, it can also disqualify you from driving. Truckers with stage 3 hypertension, that's 180 over 110, are automatically disqualified. Depression. Truck drivers spend a significant amount of time away from home and their loved ones. They also work alone for 11 hours a day. It's not uncommon for truckers to start to develop symptoms of depression. Truck driving's not an easy job. It comes with a lot of stress and anxiety. Depression not only affects a person mentally, it also affects you physically. Depression affects your energy levels and the amount of sleep you get. It can also cause a change in appetite, headaches, and muscle aches. It's important for truck drivers to consider their mental health as well as their physical health. This blog on TNCRadio.LIVE is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Want to advertise on TNCRadio.LIVE? Take advantage of great discounts for 2021. Check out the sponsors page at TNCRadio.LIVE or send email to info@TNCRadio.LIVE.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Rocky Romanella, the author of Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. You've got some great insight here, Rocky, and I was wondering if you have some tips for drivers and owner-operators to achieve better success. During the break, we were talking about negotiating loads and communication. What do you suggest? Because not all drivers necessarily are people. A lot of them are, but not everybody is. So how do they maybe take leadership for their own life and have more positive outcomes when they're dealing with their dispatcher and any other situation?
Well, I think it starts with understanding yourself and your own style. I'll give you an example. I never view myself as a salesperson, and I've always said I don't know if I could ever, even if I had to be a salesperson, I'm not sure if I would make it or if I would be starving, But, you go out with some really good sales individuals or sales executives, and they're really good at it and they love it. They thrive on it. That's not in my DNA. However, obviously, running large organizations where you have to drive revenue, you have to be part of that sales process. So for me, I always tried to find the things I was most comfortable with. And so what I found is, and I think some of you out there listening may be the same way. Hey, you know what? I like doing my job. I like to do it really well. I'm not really into being a salesperson, but you're driving revenue, and revenue is the lifeblood of your organization. So for me, it started with understanding that the customer will tell you about their, there's two ways the customers will help you. One is they'll tell you about the business, or they'll show you the business. So if you have a customer that likes to tell you about their business, a few simple questions could get them just rolling on what they do and how they do it and why they do it. If they're not that forward, or they're like maybe you and I that aren't really into large, deep conversations, well, then maybe you ask them, hey, can you show me the business? And when they show you the business, that's when they really start to talk, because now they're pointing out, hey, this is what we do in a warehouse. This is what our warehouse looks like. This is what we started. This is where the product comes from. Mm-hmm. So either way, the first key question is you need to understand their business from their perspective. And so you either ask them to tell you about the business, or they show you the business. And then as you're going through the business, you're starting to understand the opportunities that exist. And then the final question I always ask is, hey, what keeps you up awake at night? I think, unfortunately, what happens is when you're talking to the customer, it always seems like it's coming from your vantage point, what you need, because clearly you're trying to ask for more business, or ask for the business, or ask to keep the business, or thank them for the business. But it's always you. It's about you then, right? Because you're thanking them for the business, or you're asking them for business. And so for me, I always like it the other way. Hey, what keeps you up awake at night? And if we can solve what keeps them up awake at night, well, now we become a true solutions provider. We're no longer a vendor to them. We're that trusted advisor, right? I'm going to give, Joe Scafone a call because, he or she is carrying all my freight. It's the lifeblood of my organization. I'm not selling anything if that freight's not here for me to sell it, or the product's not here. So now they become an important part of your logistics team, because now you're a trusted advisor. You're not just an approved vendor to use. And so I think it's the way you interact with the customer, and the way you then the conversations you have. By the way, when you do that, then when you move from being an approved vendor, you're no longer a commodity. And I think what's important about not being a commodity is it's not always price sensitive, right? You're having conversations with them about negotiating maybe the price of the load, or maybe you have, space going back, so you can give them a little bit of rate going back, but the space coming out is space that may cost you a little bit more money. So you can have those conversations, because you're no longer a commodity to them. You're a trusted advisor. So I think that's important to get to that trusted advisor spot, so that you can have those conversations about negotiating rates, or because otherwise then it's a race to the bottom, right? That carrier will give you 26 cents a mile. Oh, can you do 25? Oh, I found someone at 23. It's just a race to the bottom. And so then it negates all of your customer service, the value that you bring. And so you always want to show that what differentiates you from everybody else. And I think it starts with understanding their business, becoming a part of their business, and moving from a approved vendor to that trusted advisor.
Exactly. Rocky, nobody got to where you are without taking some risk. And obviously drivers are not risk averse. They're going up and down mountains and driving dangerous loads at times and all that kind of stuff. But there's also risk that you have to take sometimes in the business world. What in your history, what was some of the bigger risks that you took that maybe kept you awake at night, getting in bed saying, what did I just do? And have it pay off for you?
Well, the first, I think back to when we purchased mailboxes, et cetera, and we were going through the branding of it, and should we stay as MBE? We were looking at three different scenarios: a co-branding look of MBE, the UPS store, and then what it is today, the UPS store. Right. And we went through all of the information and came to the decision. I think originally we were hoping that it would be MBE, the UPS store, and you'd have the one, maybe the logo of the UPS store and the moniker of MBE, or vice versa. The problem was in a lot of the malls and a lot of the strip malls that these stores are in, you can only have one or the other. And so that was, if 20% of the stores were getting, would be at a disadvantage if they didn't get the branding. And so, and the UPS store actually gave the biggest lift for the owners. And so now I made that presentation. And I remember at the time our CEO, Mike Eskew, looked at me and said, well, if this was your candy store, and it was well over $150 million to do the rebranding. And he said, if this was your candy store, would you do it? And so I looked at him, I said, yeah, I would. And so from that moment forward, he goes, all right, well, if you think it's the right thing to do, and you think it's it's what's best for the network, and it's what's best for our franchisees. It's what's best for the customer, and let's go ahead and do it. And so that one kept me awake for quite a while. And we made also the decision that we weren't going to mandate it. So we went out and visited all the franchisees and asked them to rebrand voluntarily. And so we had just short about 90%, about 89% of the franchisees did it voluntarily, and the other ones stayed as MBE and just kind of moved through their contract. And at the end of a 10-year period, they would all be the UPS store. But that was probably the thing that kept me awake for the longest time. And then when we went into the supply chain side, ironically, when we moved into, we were doing many of the traditional verticals of, retail, automotive. But when I made the presentation to get into healthcare, I kind of felt like I was alone there for a little while, because everybody's like, well, it seems very dangerous. Is that something we really want to do? And I felt like it was the right thing for us to do. UPS was a very compliant company, a good company, but a company that cared about its people and cared about its customers. And so it all made sense, aging population. So those were probably the two I remember them as the one that kept me up awake at night. I would say from a family point of view, every time I had to tell Debbie we were moving, that probably kept me up awake the night before. I had to tell her, hey, hon.
Just when she gets settled in, she's like, what do you mean we're leaving?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story. We were living in Syracuse at the time, and of course, I'm from Jersey. So Syracuse wasn't a bad one for us because we would, it was a 5-hour drive. And so we were driving back and forth family on a weekend to see the family. And so on the ride back, Debbie says to me, hey, she says, I'm thinking about painting the rooms and maybe give the girls, make them a little bit more feel like it's theirs. I said, nah, I wouldn't paint anything. She goes, well, only here about 18 months. I mean, you don't think we're moving, do you? I go, yeah, I think we're going to move. She goes, well, when do you think we're moving? I said, tomorrow.
Oh, no.
So she said, why did you tell me? I said, well, because I was going to ruin the weekend. You're just going to get madder at me. So you know what? I ended up going. Actually, we left Syracuse. I went to Iowa.
Oh, my.
Oh,
that's a change.
Did she like it there?
Picture a guy named Rocky Romanella in Des Moines, Iowa.
But how did your wife like it? Because that's kind of a culture shock, a whole different.
I got to tell you, we loved Iowa. Iowa was so. Here was the moves. I started in Jersey, Chicago, New York City, Syracuse, New York, Des Moines, Iowa, Orange County, California, Atlanta, Philly, Atlanta. So I would say her favorite was California. Mine was probably Chicago, and Des Moines was up there in the top 2 or 3. I mean, we loved Iowa. It was a great place to raise a family. Mm-hmm. But people would always ask me, "Hey, are you in the witness protection program?" I said, "No. If I was in the witness protection program, I'd be like Joe Smith. I wouldn't be Rocky Road. No." Right? So it was fun. We moved all 4 kids in tow, so it was good. But yeah, so that was, I would say, I would say that would probably, when you think about moving and you think about your families and you think about those kinds of things, I think, that's where the responsibility comes for these independent business owners, right? Because they're trying to balance, growing that business, but also making sure that they're taking care of their family, they're putting food on the table, they're providing the livelihood and the things that their family needs. So that's kind of the tough balance. Many of them are away from home a lot. I mean, that's the hard part of that's probably one of the other things that's difficult too, is that whole kind of work-life balance, the little league games that you miss, or the dance recitals and those kinds of things.
Yep. And they have to play by the rules with the electronic logging and everything now. They can't do any kind of creative logging, which used to be done probably 10, 15 years ago. So
I would say, though, that the biggest lesson, though, knowing what I know today, if I had to do over again for me, is, so the mistake I kind of always think back on is, to me, I placed everything as kind of, we talked about that kind of nice to do, need to do. Well, for me, growing up, to me, everything was a need to do thing, right? What I kind of learned the hard way later on is that not everything is a need to do thing. Like some of the meetings that I went to, that I really didn't have to be there for that. I always felt like as a leader, I had to be there. I had to be out in front of our people. I had to make sure I wouldn't do anything. I'm not asking them to do anything I wouldn't do. But there's a point where you don't have to be at every single meeting. And sometimes you actually overmanage by doing that. And I look back and I think there's some meetings I went to, or some events I went to, where I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm the only one here. of the leadership team. Maybe I could have been, maybe I should have went to the Little League game. So I think that besides from an organization point of view, understanding the nice to do and need to do things, I also think you have to understand that from a work-life balance. Like who in your organization, if you own more than one vehicle and there's 3 or 4 or 5 of you, who can do what? How do we share the responsibilities? How do we trust each other to do the right thing so that we can have a little bit of a work-life balance?
Good points. We have to go to break here, Rocky, and then we'll be coming back with some more great tips from you. You've got some great insight. We're talking with Rocky Romanella, author of Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for more. Mental health is a topic that isn't addressed enough in the trucking industry. There are many articles, websites, and businesses that can help truck drivers live a healthy lifestyle. But what about mental health? Mental health issues are not uncommon in truck drivers. In fact, trucking poses several risk factors when it comes to mental health issues. Lack of sleep, loneliness, stressful work environment, lack of physical activity. Truck driving can be rewarding, but health issues such as sleep apnea, obesity, diabetes, and depression can result from the strains of the job. So how do drivers prevent these health issues? Stress is an unavoidable part of trucking. Trucking allows you to see beautiful parts of the country, but it also puts you in many stressful situations. Driving in traffic in unfamiliar cities creates stress on a driver. There's stress when you're not sure if you're going to be able to deliver your load on time. You also can become stressed when you're away from home for so long. As you can tell, there are plenty of stress triggers when you drive professionally for a living. One of the best ways to reduce stress is by learning how to handle it. I realize it's easier said than done. It takes time and self-discipline. Here are some examples of ways you can reduce stress as a truck driver. Listen to music or a podcast. Start eating healthy. Exercise or stretch. Talk with family and friends. Get good sleep. Plan your trip out. In addition to managing stress, there are other ways you can keep good mental health while on the road. Drivers often portray the image of being tough. Mental health is not a discussion that many truckers are going to have. Communicating your mental health struggles with friends and family, therapists, or other drivers is a good way to work through your mental health struggles. Here's some more ways you can stay mentally healthy when you're on the road. Stay in touch with loved ones. Establish a morning and night routine. Bring a pet on the road. Travel with your spouse. Consider team driving. Bring things on the road to keep you entertained, like a laptop, video games, or TV. Occasionally book a hotel room. It's nice to get out of your truck every once in a while. Mental health is just as important as physical health. Drivers need to prioritize their mental health and take the necessary steps needed to be mentally healthy. It all starts with communicating with someone you trust, managing stress, and taking time out of the day to do something nice for yourself. For more information on mental health in truck drivers, check out Common Mental Health Issues Truck Drivers Face on the truckersnetwork.net. Thanks for listening.
Enjoy the best in trucker-style music and comedy weeknights, starting at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Rocky Romanella, the author of Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. Tom, you were saying you had a question for Rocky.
Well, with all this moving around, Rocky, I think the real question is, so you were in Chicago, Atlanta, Des Moines, California, and of course a lot in New York. Are we talking Yankees, Mets, Cards, or Cubs?
So I'm a dying Met fan.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Right now.
I was afraid.
And when you live in New York, New Jersey, you have to watch the Evil Empire. They're always the Yankees. So I would say my second team is the Cubs, though. I love, in any sport. I mean, I'm after the Giants, the Bears. In hockey, I love the Rangers, but I root for the Blackhawks if it's not the Rangers. So I would say that Chicago is probably my second team after the Mets, Rangers, from the a sports perspective.
And nothing beats sitting there in Wrigley Field eating a dog, watching a game on a Tuesday afternoon, right?
I gotta tell you, Chicago's. I mean, hey, one thing about Chicago, you'll never starve.
That's for sure.
Oh, they've got great food in Chicago.
Oh man, that's amazing, right?
Man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some of the best pizza.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, New York and New Jersey. Everybody's got their own kind of specialty.
Yeah.
You know, for Chicago's deep dish. I still my favorite Italian restaurant in Chicago is El Vicinado's on California. There, that's a great restaurant. But there's so many great restaurants in Chicago, and you know, like I said, you'll never starve there.
No.
Nope. Well, if you starve, it's because you weren't looking around. It's like,
well, you couldn't make your mind up, and so you know, it's like my mother used to always say: "You think long, you think wrong." So just pick one already. Here, let's go.
There you go. I like that. So, Rocky, we've got a few minutes before we hit the top of the hour. Could you tell everyone where they can find your book and information about you? You've got some great wisdom that everybody, I think, can really benefit from.
Well, thank you. But before I do that, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you out there, all the truckers out there. I spent 36 years at UPS. We wouldn't have been the company we were without all of you, and all of you out there driving. Be safe. You know, I still practice my five habits. You know, aim high and steering, get the big picture, keep your eyes moving, leave yourself and out, make sure they see you. So all good kids love milk. So be safe out there, and thank you. And it was a pleasure to be on the show just because I have the opportunity once again to say thank you to all of you for all you do on behalf of our country and all of us out there who rely on all the goods and services that you bring. The book is called Tighten the Lug Nuts. I think you'll find it. It's a fun read. It's written in a third person, Joe Scafone. I never like saying I would do this or I would do that. When people would bring me an idea, instead of saying, well, what if, I would say, well, you think Joe Scafone thinks that's a good idea? And so that would be my way, as Shelley said at the beginning, of challenging you not to stop at that first right answer and kind of push through that first right answer in a positive way. So I think the book was written to entertain as well as educate, and maybe create a few aha moments where you tilt your head and think, hey, that's not a bad idea. Maybe that's something that could help me. And if it does, nothing would make me happier than that. It's on, you can purchase it on Amazon. It's probably the best fulfillment for it. Barnes & Noble online. So please feel free. I'd be honored to be the official book of the Truckers Network Radio. And if it brings a smile to your face, well, nothing's better than that. And then the website is www.tightenthelugnuts.com. So I try to keep it simple. So thank you, Tom, Kelly, and Shelley. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's an honor, and I would come back anytime to say thank you and to discuss any topics that you think are important to the audience.
We've enjoyed having you. You've got some wonderful insight here that I think the drivers and owner-operators can really benefit from, especially with your book, Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. We've been speaking with Rocky Romanella. This is TNCRadio.LIVE and the Truckers Network Radio Show. We've got the Evening Surge coming up next, so definitely stay tuned for more right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Hi, this is Tom Kelly, managing partner of IMSICO, LLC, doing business as TNCRadio.LIVE. The website TNCRadio.LIVE and any content or podcast related to the website are copyrights of IMSICO, LLC, copyright 2021. All rights reserved. Any redistribution or reproduction of all or any part of the contents in any form is prohibited other than the following. We welcome you to download and play the publicly available podcast and share with others for personal use. Please acknowledge TNCRadio.LIVE as the source of the material. You may not, except with our express written permission, distribute or commercially exploit the content. And while we endeavor to keep the information up to date and correct, we make no representations or warranties of any kind expressed or implied about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to the website, the podcast, or the information, products, services, or related graphics contained on the website or podcast for any purpose. Any reliance you place on such information is therefore strictly at your own risk. For additional information, including details regarding monetization of this podcast, send email to podcasts@TNCRadio.live.